So my name is Peter Thomas and I'm Director of RMIT Forward, and welcome to Hot Takes, where we dive into the biggest issues shaping the future of work. And for years, the conversation has been about sustainability, doing less harm, but a new paradigm's emerging: regeneration. What if work didn't just minimize damage, but actively repaired systems? What if careers, organizations, and economies were designed to leave people, communities, and ecosystems stronger than they found them? And regenerative thinking challenges to redesign value around well-being, equity, resilience, and reciprocity. But what does that actually look like in a business or a team or a job? And just as importantly, how do we teach it? How do we equip the next generation of leaders and designers and workers to think regeneratively in a world still built on extraction? And joining me to discuss regenerative futures is Chris Speed, who's Professor of Design for Regenerative Futures at RMIT, and a leading voice on how design shapes sustainable systems, inclusive economies, and future-ready institutions. Let's get into it. Hello, Chris. So what is regenerative futures? How does it go beyond sustainability, and why is it gaining ground?
Hi there, Peter. Thanks for giving me a chance to talk about this. People aren't too sure precisely what it does mean, because we were happy with sustainability. Sustainability, of course, was the ability to sustain, to keep things going without too much damage or too much abundance, but somehow let's just keep it going. And in the long term, of course, that's a sustainable planet. We live on this planet, for 80, maybe we might get to 100 years, who knows? But they're short bursts in the context of time. And I think given global warming, people understand that there's responsibilities way beyond our lives. Sustainability has turned into sustainment. And sustainment is largely the retention of these lifestyles. We know that the sustainment of that particular lifestyle is unsustainable. Ultimately, you could think about layers of extraction, but it is a debt. And that debt ultimately is coming from an extraction. And if you think of the bottom lines, it used to be the financial bottom line. Now we have a triple bottom line. And now I think we're talking about a quadruple bottom line: social, economic, sustainable, environmental, if you like. And then actually, what's the story though? And the story is regenerative, the idea that let's keep what might it be like to have complete abundance. So rather than taking out all of those layers, having a little bit of extraction on the planet, a little bit of extraction on social justice, a little bit of extraction on the economy in order to invest again, what if all of it was virtuous? It managed to co-create a virtuous flywheel that actually produced more than it took away. Now, I think the critical kick is that the last 10 years, sustainability has turned into sustainment, and we needed a new language. We needed the next generation of ideas, young people, smart people, particularly interdisciplinary people. And we might talk about that, what we're doing at the university here at RMIT, about how we're bringing together different mindsets.
So that's a long-term systems change we're talking about, right? So how do we balance that with all the short-term demands that are placed on societies, organizations, governments, and systems?
What are we sustaining? If you look around what you might have done this morning, I got up, I walked to work, I'm lucky, but of course other people can't. They jump into a car, they've had mobility challenges. It's pretty good mobility here. On the other hand, I think that's a privileged perspective from where I live. Many people have not got strong mobility. So actually, although some are driving around in Teslas, that's a great smug position to be in for one person and one family. But on balance, that's people looking after themselves. What we're going to have to do is think about how collaboration, distributed economies, sharing economies begin to look at not looking after my footprint and how I might have an electric car that sorts out and washes my own debts or my extraction, but actually how we rethink systems completely. And I think you evoke this long-term systems view, and that's where we're left. Look, we've got a 20th century that had product dominant logics. I think we moved to service logics toward the end, but we still haven't jumped to systems logics. I think we really are working in silos. I think the digital economy forces us to think about ourselves, but that's fragmenting. It's actually perishing some of the collaboration we need. We don't have to own this problem individually either. We really can share it with different people. I'm a designer. I work alongside scientists, data scientists, chemical scientists, anthropologists, social scientists, and I don't own the problem.
So that's a big mindset shift, right? As you say, we've existed in the world that we're in for quite a long time now. So what's the biggest blocker to changing their mindset towards this kind of regenerative thinking? What's the big barrier we have to get over?
Honestly, it's simply collaboration is the movement and atomization is the wicked challenge. So everything that, if you're listening to this or watching to this, you're probably listening it to your device on your own. And of course, that's the ability to turn everyone into a business model. Everyone becomes a business model on their own. I use Gen AI. It changed my working processes. It's made me faster, more efficient. On the other hand, that's me, rather like Henry Ford, using a technology to make things more efficient for my own work. And that's turning me and perpetuating the idea I'm a business person, that I'm a business unit and I'll hire a tool to make productivity more effective. And the more that we're forced into these micro atomic little businesses where we're all surviving on our own, we're literally missing the opportunity to collaborate. What would it be like to share, to give the really mundane example, but your iPhone battery today? Actually, at 4 o'clock today, everyone's iPhones are going to be depleted. And yet some people may, because of their rhythms, may well be able to offset some of that energy. I don't see anyone offering the sharing of energy to allow us to begin to recover things which social conversation, social capital was central to this. So collaboration is where we need to get to, and everything we can do to move toward exchange, owning and sharing the problem.
How does regenerative thinking or futures reframe success metrics in business? We've got KPIs and quarterly profits and growth rates. How does that change when we move towards a regenerative future?
What I'm going to suggest is that there's a paradigm shift from value chains where the profit, the revenue, the outgoings, there's an amazing Porter chart around this. And actually, we need to think about a value constellation, that every value creation that I try to sustain and develop and maybe grow in my chain is only as good as those that are actually linked in a value constellation. So realistically, if a business leader, a CEO is facing an uptick in profit, I'll be honest, it probably means someone or many others are facing a downtick. So what is it to think about an economy in which we begin to link up personal value chains or business value chains and think about their interconnection? I do think business is going to struggle with circularity. So long as a business takes on its own circularity, then it's going to really struggle because no business has a supply chain that creates value by being separated from other economies, ecologies, or businesses. The next generation of leaders, business leaders, will understand the network effect of how they're creating value and how they're displacing value. And it's in that when you begin to see an abundance beginning to grow, as opposed to see a competitive model in which one flew and one crashed. So again, it's a collaboration, but through that systems view that you introduced at the start.
One of the things that we're doing at RMIT is trying to teach regenerative futures. So how do you teach that stuff without it becoming another framework or tick box exercise, that it becomes something more meaningful? How do you do that?
Really interesting. And I don't think it's easy. I think universities, perhaps when we think of 20th century businesses, these universities, they're hundreds of year old business models that just haven't pivoted. I know all of us are learning through different methodologies. At universities, wow, we decided on semesters. We had some small debate about terms and semesters, and then we didn't change. We pushed these products, and we really have been very lazy. We take the structure of schools, kids who are coming out at 18 are hyper-structured at their high schools, and then we take the fact that they don't know what to do next and simply capitalize on that absence and say, hey, do a 4-year business product with us. Do a 4-year design product with us. And honestly, I think we're throwing big time-based and, of course, property-based propositions to consumers who don't know what they want. And it's all in our interest. So I don't think we've pivoted at all. So the first thing we've done is reached out to all of the 4 colleges at RMIT, reached out to hundreds of academics, and now we have the first cohort of 40 regenerative futures fellows. And you're beginning to see really astonishing collaboration, which for the first time in their careers, they've been asked not to worry about their personal value growth, but the collaborative, the systems view.
So in terms of other kinds of learners, so we talked about undergraduate students, but what about adult learners and learners out in industry, CEOs, other folks in the commercial world that we might want to reach with this kind of thinking? How do we do that? How do we have the structures in place to do that? And what are your plans to do that?
Again, one of the conceits of selling big products to 18-year-olds is that it eclipses the opportunity to be a learning institution. So we're very interested in this new term called life-wide. We talked about lifelong, and we're talking about life-wide now. Life-wide, I think, implies not just a line until retirement. It talks about how you might change. You might shift sideways horizontally on your journey toward whatever it is you end up doing when you don't have to work. And we've missed the opportunity. We've got an astonishing campus right in the middle of Melbourne. So beginning to think about the value propositions of short form courses. So we're looking at these 2-day intensives. We're going to scaffold them either side with pre-intensive from podcast videos, papers that encourage people to do some reading and listening to get them ready for 2-day intensives. And then after that, we'll put them into mentoring pods, think about which sectors need to be put against each other so that ideas are contested again, mixed and collaborative. But those 2 days, those units, Peter, we think that the 2-day learning in person might be the right, what someone called dosage. So instead of a 13-week semester and every Tuesday, who can fit that in their life, seriously, except 18-year-olds? But a 2-day intensive is enough to decompress, upload, think about, and then really engage with others from different sectors. And it's those dosages, those morsels, that then we'll surround with social. We're really keen on a cohort effect. So we need a public event program. We need seminars. People in industry want to take the course. They need an RMIT card that just gives them access to the library, gives them somewhere to go to, free coffee machines. They might have a meeting in town, but maybe they then drop in, hang around, watch a seminar, listen to a young startup, and then do their intensive, but somehow offering more flexibility for life-wide. What's it mean to change direction in the course of your life? And then what's it mean to, in terms of width, meet new people? And it's that width again. You heard me talking about the width across the university. Let's mix up the people we meet so that we begin to learn.
That's exciting prospect, Chris. And as one of your Regenerative Futures Fellows, I'm enjoying it so far. Now, there's lots more we're going to talk about on this topic in the future, but for the moment, Chris Speed, thank you very much, and join us for the next episode in Hot Takes. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Peter.